Let's look at how the 48S pack goes together. This is outside of the OEM enclosure it's going to go in. Just so you can see, there's 5 cables here. Let's talk a little bit about the cables. I'm using very, very flexible cabling. I highly recommend you do the same. I really like this Southwire Royal Xylene. It's very, very flexible. You can turn like, sub 1 inch radius on it. It's important in a few spots that you do that. I've also wrapped these with just kind of a conduit. I really like continuous conduit that doesn't have a cut in it. So this conduit has a cut in it. This one doesn't, because you don't have to wrap this in tape. This conduit does need to be wrapped in tape for that insulation value. So I recommend getting it just not cut. You have to, just slide the wires into it then. So let's look at the configuration here. I've got it off to the right here, and I've got these tabs labeled here. So like this one goes from the switch to battery 1 minus. The junction board, when we put this in the pack in the next video, will be right here just for reference. But for now, let's just kind of look at how these cables lay out. So the switch hooks up to the batteries. Oh, as far as the batteries are concerned, there's bay 1, bay 2, and bay 3. And right now this is how they're pointing. They would point up. Now for this video, I'm going to turn them sideways just because I think it's a little more illustrative. But in the case, they'll be as they were shown before. So you can see here that on the 18S packs, we have negative on the connector side, but on the 12S, the positive is over here. So that's what makes this routing a little bit weird. But what we're going to do, these are labeled battery 2 plus. So this will be battery 2 positive, and this goes to the fuse. So that one's going to go from this junction here, this terminal here, to the junction board. This one is battery 2 minus to battery 3 plus. So this one will go around there. That's the one where we had to drill holes in the pack, and we'll look at that in a bit. This one is battery 3 minus, and it's actually the HVDC negative. That's going to go right there. So this battery, and then to the negative on the junction board. And then next up we have switch to battery 1 minus, which is here. So this is going to wrap around and go up to the switch on the junction board. And last up we have the battery 1 plus, which goes to the relay. So that one will be right there. So you can see that the wiring is a bit weird, but I needed all 3 of these to be on the same side. The 12S lays out a little bit easier and has a little bit less cabling, but at the end of the day, this is totally fine. I do want to talk safety as we're hooking these cables up. So these packs are pretty low voltage. Technically, the 18S pack is more than 60 volts DC, which is where you have to start treating it as a high voltage thing. You don't want to touch the 2 terminals. So in general, as long as you are only touching one specific terminal, but not 2 of them, in general, you're going to be okay. Now, because these packs are not connected yet, technically it's okay to do this, but just for good safety measures, you really only want to be touching one thing at a time. As we're hooking these cables up, we're going to get to a point where the batteries are, we have a high voltage stack, and it's very likely that if you touch 2 different places, you might actually electrocute yourself. DC electrocution is very different than AC. If you've ever felt AC voltage, you can feel that 60 hertz or 50 hertz, you can feel it. With DC, it's very different. You just can't let go. You feel very tense, but you're not shaking. You have a DC going through you. High voltage DC is much more dangerous than high voltage AC. They're both very dangerous. But if you do this wrong, you could kill yourself. So standard caveat there. So I'm going to move these batteries out of the way. We'll hook them up. In the next video, I'll show them hooked up as we install them in the pack. But for now, I just want to move them out of the way, and I want to look at the junction board. Just forgot one. Oh, just kind of a note. This relay to battery 1 plus doesn't have any insulation over it. There's no metal it gets near, and this one needs to be the most flexible. You can see where I've installed it previously that it has a little kink in it where we go through the current sensor. We'll look at that more, but all the other ones should have insulation around them as a backup. So I'm going to move these out of the way. We'll look at the junction board. So I've got 2 junction boards here. Neither one of them is complete. These are both junction boards left over from people who have done the how to completely remove your IMA battery thing. So the changes I've made, this one here is how you'll find it. This is theoretically and as you would find it. Now it is missing the fuse here. It's also missing the connector that goes to the DC-DC. You're gonna want those. They're just not shown here. They don't really matter. So what we do is we're gonna take these plastic covers off. There's tabs you push here and there, and then they'll both come off. And there's the fuse down here and the switches up here. And we're gonna take away this metal connector here because we're gonna replace it with a cable. And so we won't have that bus bar. And we're also going to, we're gonna remove the bus bar underneath here. So there's a, let me take this off real quick. Push that, push this. Okay. And then we also have to get that wire out there. Wish I brought a clip with me. Probably should have done this off camera. So, there's that. There's that. So, we're going to get rid of this bus bar here. It's hooked on with the Phillips head screw right here. This Phillips head screw is ungodly tight. Make sure you have a really large, either like a number 3 Phillips or a very wide flat blade. Otherwise, you'll strip that head out. So this bar goes away. It'll be replaced with a cable. This stays. This one goes away, and that's it. You don't make any other changes. So that's how we'll prepare the junction boards. The last thing we'll need to do, if you look, let me move this fuse cover here. Not this difficult. So we need to remove this bus bar as well. But what I was really going at here is, see how I've widened these out? I just took a pair of pliers in here and broke this plastic off. When you use the covered wire, two wires will fit through there, but when you cover it with that conduit, they'll no longer fit. So you need to go ahead and break this one round, and also this one as round as you can. This one doesn't actually go around, but you can see the difference where that's where the battery cell is, and this is like an extra little bit of insulation. I just went in there with needle nose pliers. I removed this temporarily. I just undid that screw so that I could get in here and break that off a little more easily. I finished this one off with a razor blade, but if these aren't wide enough, you're gonna have a hard time getting the wires through them. So that's kind of the setup. We'll move on next to how to actually put these in the pack.